unbelievable. We've, almost every year for the past 10 years, we've had double-digit growth, including last year. So in 2016, we distributed around $885 million. That was up roughly 10% over the year before. I keep informing our board and our constituents, you can't do double-digit growth forever. At some point, it's going to level out. But it's been a very surprising 10 years, I think. Nobody a decade ago knew we would be where we are today. And it really, it's due to so many things. It's due to, obviously, in part, it's due to, I'd like to think, our occupancy of the space and what we're doing to try to, get fair rates. But it's also due to consumer behavior, consolidation of entertainment onto one device, the expansion of, into mobile. And also, really, there's a lot more offerings now. The exciting thing about the market today is maybe 10 years ago, there were a handful of big leaders who did digital radio, and now there's many more opportunities, many more business models, many more things for the consumer to use. We just need to make sure they're all paying fairly for the music that drives their service.
One thing that is also specific to Sound Exchange is that, first of all, it was a law, the DMCA, that made you exist from day one. The second thing is that you are quite restricted and limited in what you can collect and who from. Can you explain us a little bit more what,
Sure.
Compared to, say, a PPL in the UK that really collects from absolutely everyone, you only collect from a very narrow segment of the market.
Well, I'd probably caveat that a little bit. The law that you're talking about, the DMCA, and actually a law before that in '95 as well, for the first many years of our existence, the bulk of what we collected from was, quote, non-interactive digital radio. So, the big players over those years, way back when it was, Yahoo and AOL, remember those guys? And on through, Pandora, and now it's Pandora, Sirius XM, iHeartRadio. So when the statutory license that we collected the bulk of our money on that's what you're talking about. And unfortunately, on the sound recording side, that's one of the few places where there is a performance right. Unlike the rest of the world, sound recordings do not merit a royalty payment under our law when they are used in a venue, when they're used on AM/FM radio, when you're at whether it's a bar or a club or a restaurant. So the sound recording rights in this country are well behind the rest of the world, and the statutory license that we administer is an even smaller set of that. Now, that being said, we have, over the past several years, we've diversified, and we actually do a lot more than just that. And we administer direct licenses outside of that. We have over a dozen licenses that we are the back office for. We do data integrity work with some very big companies that you would recognize. We help administer some class action settlements, the pre-72 settlements that everyone hopefully is aware of. We are helping to administer the back end of that, and other things. So you shouldn't think of us anymore as just the internet radio processing shop. We've taken our systems and leveraged them to do more things for the industry.
About half of what you collect is paid back to labels, and the other half to performers and musicians. That's correct?
Right. Under the law, on that the statutory part that we talked about, 50% goes to the master owner, 45% goes to the featured artist, and 5% of everything. This is actually something a lot of people don't know. 5% of all that we collect goes to a fund that pays background vocalists, background musicians, session performers, and it's not a huge chunk of the money. It's 5%, but I think that's a neat aspect of the law because session performers, a lot of times they just go in, get paid scale or double scale, and that's the end of it. And they can sometimes contribute a lot to the recording, and this allows them to share in some downstream revenue.
So let's talk about your main clients on the on the platform side. Pandora, iHeart, Sirius XM. Sirius XM seems to be doing very well. iHeart is loaded with debt, and Pandora, we don't know what tomorrow is going to be made of with Pandora. aren't you afraid of what tomorrow can be for Sound Exchange? You know, when you in that kind of environment.
We're definitely not afraid of tomorrow. I mean, that's all natural in a developing market. You know, what I actually, from my perspective, we're in an exciting time in the industry where, you know, yeah, there's going to be some turbulence like any growing industry, and there's going to be some change and some shift and new businesses. On the iHeart instant, you know, you're talking about the debt coming due and what they're doing to try to handle the debt. I'm hopeful and expect that will be worked out. And even with Pandora, you know, Pandora, they have, you know, 70 plus million users. I know there's been discussions about SiriusXM and Pandora sales, and if the sale doesn't happen, there's discussion about further investment from KKR. I think I read Verizon may be investing $100 million. So, you know, I view this as part of a healthy, growing market. You know, you want businesses to be challenged. You want them to always try to be more efficient, come up with better ways of serving the public, and it's natural in a growing market. So we don't, you know, we don't wake up worried about tomorrow. We're trying to position Sound Exchange to be ready for whatever tomorrow brings.
But Pandora is also switching, and, you know, has introduced recently a premium subscription service, and they're trying to take users from the free side and bring them into the subscription side. So, which means technically that might mean less revenue for you from the free side, because the subscription side is, you know, paid directly to labels. So isn't that also a risk for you in terms of future revenues?
I mean, it's definitely a change. You know, as I mentioned, we are in the we have a broader view. We sort of represent all recording artists and really all creators, especially as of a month ago, you know, where we branched out into other parts of the industry. And we are happy when sort of things mean creating more value for creators. And as I mentioned, we're involved in a lot of those other things. We're involved in some direct licenses. Will we be involved in every single direct license? No. Will we be, you know, administering everything that happens? No. But you know, we're excited if the pie's growing and the market's getting healthier and creators are getting more value for their work, and we're positioning the company to offer services to all of those groups. So, you know, it may mean the money may flow differently, may flow through different organizations, may still flow through us in a different way, but if it's good for creators, it's good for the industry.
So let's talk about a recent development for Sound Exchange. You announced a couple of weeks ago that you were acquiring a Canadian company, CMRA, from music publishers, and CMRA does mostly mechanical licensing.
Right.
What's the rationale for a company like Sound Exchange to move into the mechanical licensing world?
You know,
by the way, did you pay what, 3 million, 4 million for that?
We haven't announced what the terms are, but
am I right in? is it a good?
You know, it's not as crazy as it seems, and actually, if you think about it, it's not going to be crazy to anybody in this room. The driving force, one of the frustrations I've had for as long as I've been in the industry, is the silos that our industry has. You know. You have all these different places where either data resides or operations reside, and God forbid you mix publishing and sound recording. It's like the Rubicon River running in between. And maybe it made sense to have such segmented systems and data and admin. Maybe it made sense, you know, years ago. We could debate that. But in a global world that's digital, that runs at the scale of digital, it doesn't make sense. It's a hindrance to business. So we are constantly looking for just ways to improve the efficiency of the business overall. And one of the obvious ones that everyone in this room has thought about and probably talked about is, and that you see in, you know, the press every week or every other week, wouldn't it be great if we could have better data on the back end, more consolidated data? Wouldn't it be better if, you know, if operating and administering these businesses was more collaborative and more coordinated? And that was really what drove us to think about, you know, what we could provide to a broader music community.
You mentioned data. Data is really what rules your business, because with crap data, you have crap. Royalty payments and so on and so forth. Right. Memo to people in the room: make sure you have the right identifiers, otherwise you will never get paid. Right. I guess that's the underline. But you have an initiative with the IFPI, the International Federation of Producers, based in London, to build up a database of identifiers. Are you going to combine that database with CMRAs to have the one authoritative database that will combine both the recording and the composition rights?
Well, there's a couple things buried in there. There's a lot of database efforts going on around the world, and there have been, with names like GRD and others. And we have to have better data in the industry. You're right, it's critically important. It drives, it determines where the money goes, and in an industry, that's pretty important. So that's part of what drove us, as I said. That was, one of the main drivers to say, hey, what if we combined with CMRA and at least for North America, start to marry up publishing and sound recording and have a comprehensive resource that allows you to sort of handle all parts of the industry. IFPI is also doing something. We're obviously, part of IFPI. We work with them, and we are, we're in those talks as well. I think that's a sort of separate, different project. Maybe they'll marry up at one time. We're sort of working that all through now. We just purchased CMRA just a month ago, so we're kind of in the middle of figuring out what should be the priorities, what should we back burner. But we share the view that IFPI shares, that the other CMO shares, that the publisher share, that the label share, that this data problem's got to be fixed. I mean, and given the technology, I've used this line with you before, but we sent a man to the moon 6 decades ago, and we still don't know who wrote a song, and that kind of doesn't make sense.
Isn't it interesting that the Canadian Performing Rights Society, SOCAN, could have bought CMRA and didn't, but instead bought MediaNet, which is a sound recording database. So it seems that there's going to be a little bit of competition in the data world, isn't it?
There may be, and SOCAN's a great company. They do great things in Canada. There's a lot of entities are doing the same type of thing. They're looking for ways to consolidate the back office, to combine data. I think, one of our philosophies is sourcing ownership data from the rights owner is critical. We believe that the rights owner should give us the data, and if we find errors, we send it back to the rights owner and say resubmit, so that it closes the loop, and we're reporting back to them the same thing they reported to us. I don't believe that I think MediaNet has had a different philosophy, and so I think that the data may be sourced differently in that regard. But your question about competition, yeah, there may be competition, and competition is great. We feel very well positioned to compete wherever we are, and competition drives progress.
So CMRA was your first acquisition. Any other in view? Any market segment that you are targeting these days?
We're always looking for opportunities that can improve the overall ecosystem, but I think we're waiting for the ink to dry on this one and straighten it out before thinking beyond that.
Okay. Let's talk about the legal environment. We said earlier that you are ruled by Section 114, statutory license and all that. One of the big claims from the recorded music side, but I think endorsed by most people in the industry, is what we call the Fair Pay Act, which would lead to AM, FM stations paying royalties on recorded music that they play. How likely is this going to happen? Yesterday, Susan Butler, who was sitting here, and I think you were in the audience, said, from her perspective, what she hears is that as long as the industry is not going to speak with one voice, nothing is going to happen.
Well, it is definitely true that Congress is more likely to do something if you present them a solution, a comprehensive solution. So, I think there's more momentum in the Fair Play, Fair Pay Act than there ever has been. Hopefully everybody knows what Emmanuel was talking about, but FM radio pays for the use of the musical work, as they should. All begins with a song, right? But we stand alone in the industrialized world in not paying for the recording. And that's a fight that the recording industry has been fighting for 8 decades. It goes back to Frank Sinatra. I think there's more momentum now than there has been in the past several years. It's hard to pass legislation, there's no doubt about it. So I think there's probably a panel on that maybe following this. But we're good. We keep pushing, and there's definitely more people signing on than ever before. So,
another thing that you are, in the deep of at the moment is the CRB procedures for setting rates for the next 4 years.
5 years.
5 years.
For satellite radio. Yeah.
So there's been hearings and so on. It's a long process. It's a tedious process. What do you think is going to come out of it?
So, you never know, and you never want to predict what a judge will do, especially a 3-judge panel. That's 3 times the uncertainty. The fact of the matter is we feel pretty good about the case we put in. So you're talking about the next 5-year term for Sirius XM. It's the only satellite radio company in the U.S. At a very high level, you mentioned earlier, Sirius XM is doing quite well. They're in a very different position now than they were the last time around in terms of their health and their revenue and their economics. So we feel that we've put in a case that justifies an increase in the rates, and we certainly hope that'll be the outcome.
Mm-hmm. You have a few indie labels sitting on your board. You have Richard from A2IM who joined the board a few months ago. What do they ask you? What do they tell you, coming from their perspective as indie labels, that you're doing well or not doing well, that you should be improving?
That's a great question.
More money, I suppose, yeah. But everybody would like that.
So Richard Burgess, great board member sitting right here. He's been on there actually longer than a couple months, than a couple years now, right? Also, Vic Zaraya and Darius Van Arman. I don't know if they're here in the room. The indies are a great part of our board. I mean, they all are. We represent basically the entire recorded music space. So we have major labels, indie labels, trade associations, A2IM. We also have on a whole artist side. It's a very diverse group of people. And the thing about Sound Exchange, I think the indie community and Sound Exchange have a very good relationship. They participate a lot more heavily in what we do. So in typical over-the-air radio, I think it's like a 90-10 split, majors versus indies. In our world, it's 2/3, 1/3. About 1/3 of what we paid out approximately last year went to the indie community. And that's a big chunk of money. Sound Exchange on a wholesale basis is basically 16% of all recorded music revenue in the U.S. So we view them as the indies as a very important constituency. And what Sound Exchange brings to the indie community is the back office that it would be hard for any of them to have individually. The litigation protection, not just the rates. We do enforcement litigation. We do audits. And we do that on behalf of the whole industry, but for the indies as well. So you should ask them, but I think they feel pretty well served. We certainly are focused on serving the indie community, and I think it's a great partnership.
Well, we're going to open the floor for questions. Anyone? Richard, you had a question?
He said he was just going to say it is a great partnership. I want to make sure y'all heard that.
Hi there, this is a really interesting panel. Thanks for your time today. I'm interested in the impact of big companies like Cobalt, who are going to start negotiating directly, is what I'm reading, with companies like Sirius, and how that affects your business going forward.
It's kind of if you're talking about on the performing side, on the neighboring rights side, I kind of repeat, I think what I said earlier. If people do direct deals, that's the marketplace. We still may have a role to play in administering some of that. We are really good at what we do. We have the best sound recording database in the world, serious expertise in processing this stuff. experience, a brand new platform that's the best in the world. So we're well positioned to provide different services, even if it's not the straight up statutory 114. Like I said, we're already doing over a dozen of these direct deals. So we're happy to have the market go where it goes, and we'll react appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Is Cobalt a thorn in your side, or no?
No, not from my perspective.
No.
I don't know what Willer would say, but I don't think they're a thorn in our side. I spoke earlier about different business models and different services and different offerings. Cobalt is an interesting company to watch.
That's an understatement. Any other question?
I think that's Debbie.
Hi, yes, Debbie Newman. So several years ago, the Copyright Office, the U.S. Copyright Office, did this big study with roundtables all over the country on music licensing reform, and one of the topics that came out of it was the issue of multiple rights organizations, was the silos of the performing rights and the mechanical rights, and this move towards theoretically trying to open up the marketplace so that ASCAP and BMI could do mechanical licensing, and CSAC and Harry Fox are now together, but ASCAP and BMI are stuck in this battle with the Department of Justice over the consent decrees, and even just the way they've been doing business for the last, I don't know, 80 years or 90 years, whatever it is. So now you and Simra and CSAC and Harry Fox, this multiple rights thing is actually starting to happen in the non-consent decree world, everything where free market transactions can happen. You're still going to end up with a bunch of silos. How does this become, when you talk about the data problem, everybody's got their own database. Blockchain is, who knows what that's going to mean in this world of licensing 10 years from now or whatever. But how do you end up solving this problem when you still are going to have silos? Maybe the rights will be expanded, but there will still be silos that are trying to compete in your space.
There's a lot in that question. Good question. And you're right about what's happening in the U.S. ASCAP and BMI, this is not a sound exchange position, but personally, I don't understand why they're not able to do mechanicals. And they definitely, the consent decrees that have been there for 80 years are really inhibiting what they can do. Luckily, that's not happening in Canada now that we're with CMRA. There are a lot of moves to do this type of consolidation, and you say there'll still be silos. If you have one entity that maybe that's Sound Exchange, maybe that's someone else that can offer a bundling of rights and new configurations for rights, I don't think of that as a silo. When I think of silos, I think I'm a DSP. I'm going to open up a DSP. The tech community looks at the music industry and rolls their eyes about all the places they have to go. I teach a class at Georgetown Law School on music law. On the very first day, I have a quadrant that I draw that attempts to explain the music industry. And after their eyes come back from in the back of their head, I tell them they're all lucky it's law school and not business school. Because business school, if you drew something that looked like the music industry, obviously none of us would do it that way if we had a blank slate. So when I think of silos, I think of, if I'm a DSP, where are the 14 places I have to go to get what I need? If there's one place I can go, I don't think of that as a silo, I think of that as a solution. So I guess I would, maybe take issue